James sat at the dining table, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the quiet house. His wife, Emily, had just left for her usual late-night meetings, something she'd been doing more frequently over the past few months. At first, James hadn't questioned it. Emily worked in event planning, and late hours were part of the job. But lately, something had felt off. It wasn't just the meetings. It was the way she had started dressing differently, wearing perfume she hadn't used in years and constantly guarding her phone like it held state secrets. James had always trusted her, but the distance between them had become impossible to ignore. That evening, after Emily left, James decided to take a closer look. Her laptop sat open on the counter. She always logged out of her accounts, but tonight, a chat window had been left open. James hesitated, his hand hovering over the trackpad. He didn't want to be the kind of man who snooped, but something inside him whispered that he needed to know. The messages were casual at first, but as he scrolled further, his stomach twisted. The tone shifted, flirty, personal. And then, there it was. "I can't wait to see you tonight. Last week was incredible." The sender was someone named Ryan. A quick look at his profile revealed a young man in his mid-20s, grinning confidently in gym selfies. James felt a rush of emotions, anger, betrayal, humiliation, but he didn't let them consume him. Instead, he closed the laptop and sat back, his mind racing. Emily thought she was clever, that she could sneak around without him noticing. She was wrong. The next day, James pretended nothing had changed. He kissed Emily goodbye as she left for work, even complimenting her on her dress. She smiled, clearly oblivious, and drove off. Their 17-year-old daughter, Lily, walked into the kitchen moments later, grabbing her backpack. "Dad, you're not mad that Mom's working so late, right?" she asked casually, her tone almost protective. James froze for a moment. "Why do you ask?" "I don't know," Lily shrugged. "She just said you've been acting weird lately." James forced a smile. "No, everything's fine. Don't worry about it." But deep down, he realized something was wrong. Emily had already begun spinning her web, turning their daughter against him before he even had a chance to speak. It was clear now. Emily wasn't just betraying their marriage. She was dismantling their family. James knew he had to act, but he wouldn't confront Emily outright. Not yet. He needed proof, something undeniable that would expose her lies. And when the time came, he wouldn't just walk away quietly. He would make sure Emily and Ryan paid for what they had done, and he wouldn't let Lily see him as the villain. For now, though, James kept his anger hidden, playing the part of the oblivious husband. Emily thought she was in control, but she had no idea the storm that was brewing. James spent the next few days observing Emily more closely. Every small detail became a clue: the way she smiled at her phone, the sudden changes in her schedule, and her growing defensiveness whenever he asked simple questions. He didn't push her, though. He played the role of the unsuspecting husband, knowing that his patience would pay off. One evening, Emily announced she was heading out again for work. James nodded, barely looking up from his newspaper. "Drive safe," he said, keeping his tone neutral. As soon as the door shut behind her, he sprang into action. He had placed a GPS tracker in her car earlier that week, and now he checked his phone to see where she was heading. Her car wasn't going toward her office or any event venue. It was heading toward a downtown apartment complex. James clenched his jaw but didn't let anger cloud his judgment. He grabbed his keys and followed her, keeping a safe distance to avoid being noticed. When James arrived at the complex, he parked a few buildings away and watched as Emily got out of her car. She was dressed differently tonight, more casual, but in a way that screamed effort. She looked around nervously before heading inside. Moments later, a young man stepped out to meet her. Ryan. James sat in his car, watching the scene unfold. He didn't need to see any more to confirm what he already knew. But instead of confronting them, he took out his phone and began taking pictures. He captured Emily entering the building, Ryan greeting her, and even a brief hug that left no room for doubt. The next day, James took another step. He hired a private investigator to dig deeper. If Emily thought she could lie her way out of this, she was wrong. The investigator worked quickly, providing James with a detailed report that included timestamps, photos, and even a record of Emily's bank transactions. Payments for dinners, gifts, and hotel rooms she had shared with Ryan. The evidence was overwhelming. Despite his anger, James felt a strange calmness settle over him. He wasn't going to lose control. If Emily thought she could manipulate the situation, he would show her just how wrong she was. But what hurt the most wasn't just her betrayal, it was the subtle way she had begun turning Lily against him. He could feel the distance growing between him and his daughter, fueled by Emily's lies. One evening, as they sat at the dinner table, James decided to test the waters. "Lily," he said casually, "does your mom ever talk about me when I'm not around?" Lily looked up from her plate, her expression guarded. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious," James replied, keeping his tone light. Lily hesitated, then said, Sometimes she says you don't understand how hard she works, that you're controlling." James felt a pang of sadness but hid it well. "And do you believe that?" Lily shrugged, avoiding his gaze. "I don't know, Dad. Sometimes you seem, upset all the time." James didn't respond right away. He couldn't blame Lily for being confused. Emily had been planting these seeds for months, carefully crafting her narrative. But James wasn't going to let her win. He leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "Lily, I want you to know something. I've always loved you, and I've always been honest with you. Whatever happens, I hope you'll remember that." Lily nodded, though her expression remained uncertain. James knew it wasn't enough to undo Emily's influence, but it was a start. That night, as Emily slept, James sat in his study, reviewing the evidence he had collected. He was ready now. The pieces were in place, and soon Emily would face the consequences of her actions. But James didn't just want to expose her. He wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done, to understand that her lies had destroyed more than just their marriage, and when the time came, he would make sure Lily saw the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The morning after gathering the last piece of evidence, James woke up feeling resolute. Emily went about her routine as if everything was normal. She kissed him on the cheek before heading out, muttering something about a long day at work. James smiled faintly, masking the storm brewing inside him. Once she was gone, James took out the neatly compiled folder of evidence. Every lie, every betrayal, every deceitful act was documented. He wasn't just going to confront her, he was going to dismantle the web of lies she had built. But he needed to start with Lily. She was the most important person in his life, and he couldn't let Emily's manipulation pull them apart any further. When Lily came home from school that afternoon, James was waiting for her in the living room. She looked surprised to see him sitting there holding a cup of coffee, his face calm but serious. "Can we talk for a minute?" James asked. Lily hesitated but nodded, sitting across from him. "I know things have felt a little strained between us lately," James began, choosing his words carefully. "And I know your mom has probably said some things about me that might make you feel unsure about what's going on." Lily looked down at her hands, not meeting his eyes. "It's just, you and Mom always seem so distant now. She says you don't trust her." James leaned forward, his voice steady. "Lily, there's something you need to see. Not because I want to hurt you, but because I want you to know the truth." He handed her the folder. Lily hesitated before opening it, her eyes scanning the contents. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock as she flipped through the pages, photos of Emily and Ryan together, text messages, receipts. "This is what your mom has been doing," James said quietly. "She's been lying to both of us, pretending everything is fine while doing this behind our backs." Lily's hands trembled as she closed the folder. I didn't know," she whispered. "I know," James said, his voice softening. "But now you do. And I want you to understand that I never stopped loving you, no matter what happens between me and your mom." Lily nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "What are you going to do?" James took a deep breath. "I'm going to confront her, but I needed you to know the truth first. I didn't want you to hear it from someone else or believe the lies she's been telling." That evening, James waited for Emily to come home. He had already set the stage. Her laptop was placed on the dining table, connected to the TV, ready to display the evidence he had prepared. When she walked in, she seemed surprised to see James and Lily sitting together, the air heavy with tension. "What's going on?" Emily asked, forcing a smile. James didn't reply immediately. Instead, he stood up and gestured toward the dining table. "Sit down," he said, his tone calm but firm. Emily hesitated, sensing something was wrong. "James, what's this about?" "You'll see," he replied, his expression unreadable. Emily sat down reluctantly, her eyes darting between James and Lily. James picked up the remote and turned on the TV. The first image appeared, a photo of her and Ryan at the apartment complex. Emily's face went pale. "James, I can explain." "Don't," James interrupted, his voice sharp. "Don't insult my intelligence by pretending there's an explanation for this." He clicked to the next slide, a screenshot of their text messages. Emily's breathing grew shallow, her hands clutching the edge of the table. "Do you know what hurts the most?" James said, his voice steady but filled with quiet anger. "It's not just that you cheated, it's that you lied to our daughter, turned her against me, and acted like you were the victim in all of this." Lily stared at her mother, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, how could you?" Emily reached for Lily's hand, but Lily pulled away, standing up and moving closer to James. "I didn't mean for it to happen," Emily stammered. "It was a mistake." "A mistake," James said, his voice rising. "A mistake is something that happens once. This wasn't a mistake, Emily. This was a choice you made over and over again." Emily broke down, sobbing into her hands. James felt no sympathy. He had been patient, calm, and understanding for too long. Now it was time for her to face the consequences. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," James said coldly. "The divorce papers will be ready by the end of the week. You'll sign them and you'll leave this house. You can figure out the rest of your life with Ryan or whoever else you've been seeing, but you won't be dragging me or Lily into your mess anymore." Emily looked up, her face streaked with tears. "James, please." "No," he said firmly. "You made your choices. Now you'll live with them." The house was eerily silent after Emily stormed out, her sobs echoing faintly as the door slammed behind her. James sat on the couch, Lily beside him, her face still pale with shock. She hadn't said much since the confrontation, but her presence at his side said enough. She wasn't choosing Emily. She had seen the truth, and for now that was enough for James. Over the next few days, Emily's absence was both a relief and a weight. The quiet brought peace, but also a sense of finality. James busied himself with work and spent more time with Lily, trying to rebuild their bond. He didn't push her to talk about what had happened, but made it clear he was there if she needed him. Emily, on the other hand, wasn't going quietly. She called repeatedly, leaving long, tearful voicemails. At first, she begged for forgiveness, swearing that Ryan had meant nothing to her. But as James continued to ignore her, her tone shifted. Her messages became angrier, accusing him of ruining their family and poisoning Lily against her. One evening, Lily came home visibly upset. She threw her backpack onto the couch and sat down, her arms crossed tightly. "Mom came to my school today," she said, her voice trembling. James froze. "What did she say?" "She told me you're making her out to be the bad guy," Lily replied, tears welling in her eyes. "That you're trying to take me away from her." James took a deep breath, his hands clenching at his sides. He knew Emily wouldn't go down without a fight, but dragging Lily into it was a new low. "Lily," he said gently, "you know the truth. You've seen it. Don't let her make you doubt what you already know." Lily nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. "I know, Dad, it's just, she's my mom. I don't know what to do." James put a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to choose. I'll never make you feel like you have to. But I won't let her keep manipulating you either." Emily's desperation. Emily's life was unraveling quickly. Ryan, the younger man she had risked everything for, had distanced himself after James exposed their affair. Without the thrill of secrecy, their relationship fell apart. Emily found herself alone, desperate to regain control of the situation. She started showing up at the house unannounced, pounding on the door and yelling for James to let her in. Each time, James refused, calmly calling the police if she refused to leave. The restraining order he filed against her was granted swiftly, cutting off her access to the home she had once taken for granted. But Emily didn't stop there. She began reaching out to mutual friends, painting James as a controlling husband who had pushed her into Ryan's arms. Some believed her, but others had already heard the full story from James, backed by the evidence he had shared. Her web of lies was collapsing, and she had no one left to blame but herself. James's turning point. For James, the days that followed were a mix of relief and heartache. He knew he had done the right thing, but the weight of the betrayal lingered. One evening, as he sat in the backyard watching the sunset, Lily joined him, a hesitant smile on her face. "I was thinking," she said, breaking the silence, "maybe we should go somewhere, just the two of us. A fresh start." James looked at her, surprised. "You'd want that?" Lily nodded. "Yeah, I think it'd be good for both of us. We don't need all this drama anymore." James smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through him. For the first time in months, he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe Lily was right. Maybe it was time to leave the past behind and focus on the future. James took Lily's suggestion to heart. The idea of starting fresh somewhere new felt like the escape they both needed. The house they had shared with Emily held too many painful memories, and staying there felt like living in a constant reminder of betrayal. He made the decision quickly, listing the house for sale and beginning the process of finding a new place for him and Lily. Lily seemed lighter, more at ease, as they discussed plans. "What about somewhere by the coast?" she asked one evening. "You've always said you wanted to live near the water." James smiled. "The coast sounds perfect. Let's make it happen." Within weeks, the house was sold. James found a modest but beautiful home near a quiet beach, far from the chaos Emily had created. Moving day was bittersweet. Leaving behind the home where so many memories had been made was hard, but the promise of a new beginning was stronger. Lily was excited, and her optimism gave James the strength to keep moving forward. Emily's last attempt. As James and Lily settled into their new home, Emily's desperation reached new heights. She showed up unannounced at Lily's school again, pleading with her daughter to see reason. Lily refused to engage, walking away while Emily caused a scene in the parking lot. The school principal contacted James immediately, and he arrived to handle the situation. When James pulled into the lot, Emily was pacing, her face flushed with anger. "You can't keep me from her, James," she yelled as he approached. James kept his voice calm but firm. "This isn't about keeping her from you, Emily. This is about you facing the consequences of your actions. Lily deserves peace, and you're not giving her that." Emily's expression wavered, a mix of anger and sadness. "I made a mistake, James. I've apologized. What more do you want?" "I want you to stop dragging Lily into this," James said. "You've already caused enough damage. Let her heal." Emily stared at him, her anger fading into something closer to defeat. She knew she had lost control of the situation. "You think you've won, don't you?" she said bitterly. "This isn't about winning," James replied. "It's about moving on, something you need to figure out for yourself. Building a new life." Back at their new home, James and Lily began to truly settle in. The days were slower, quieter, and filled with small but meaningful moments. James took long walks on the beach, the sound of the waves helping to wash away the pain of the past. Lily started making new friends at her school and even joined a local art class, rediscovering her creativity. One evening, as they sat on the back porch watching the sunset, Lily turned to James with a smile. "I think we're going to be okay, Dad." James looked at her, pride swelling in his chest. "Yeah," he said, his voice steady. "I think we are." For the first time in what felt like forever, James felt a sense of peace. He had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and chaos, but he had come out stronger. Most importantly, he had kept his relationship with Lily intact, giving her a chance to grow into a strong, independent young woman. Weeks passed, and James finally felt like he could breathe again. He had his peace, his new life, and the strength to look ahead. Though Emily's attempts to re-enter their lives had become fewer and farther between, her presence still lingered in the background. James knew that eventually he would have to deal with her once and for all, not just for his sake, but for Lily's. One late afternoon, as James was sitting in the new living room, organizing some paperwork, his phone rang. The caller ID flashed Emily's name. For a moment he hesitated. He hadn't spoken to her directly in weeks. He didn't know what she wanted now, but he was done being caught off guard. With a deep breath, he answered. "James," Emily's voice came through, strained and distant. "I know I've done a lot of things I can't take back, but I need to see you." James stayed silent for a moment, weighing his options. He knew this wasn't about reconciliation. It was about her needing closure, not him. But he didn't need to carry her guilt anymore. Still, he agreed to meet her one last time. For Lily's sake, he decided. He needed to ensure Emily understood the impact of her choices. That evening, they met at a quiet cafe, a neutral space. James arrived first, his posture confident as he sat at a corner table. When Emily walked in, she looked different. Dressed plainly, her face drawn with exhaustion and regret. She hesitated before sitting down across from him. "I didn't want to meet here," Emily started, voice shaky. "But I couldn't bring myself to show up at your house again." James nodded, his tone level. "I'm glad you chose this place. I didn't want to have this conversation at home either." She shifted in her seat, uncomfortable. "I know what you're thinking. I'm sorry. But I needed to say this. I wanted you to know that I've realized what I lost, what I threw away." James didn't respond immediately. He'd heard these kinds of apologies before. Empty, meant to absolve her, not truly apologize. "James, I love you. I always have. I was just lost," she continued, her voice quiet now, almost pleading. "I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to know I never meant to hurt you or Lily. James raised a hand to stop her, his voice firm but calm. "You didn't just hurt me, Emily. You hurt Lily too. She trusted you. And what you did, how you lied, how you made her doubt me, it almost cost me her. But what hurts the most is that you don't even see the damage. You think an apology will fix things." Emily opened her mouth to respond, but James stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I don't need this. I'm done carrying your burden. I've forgiven you already, but not for your sake, only for mine. It's time you take responsibility for your actions, not just to me, but to Lily too. And when you do, maybe then you can start healing." He turned to leave, his final words lingering in the air. "I'm done with the past, Emily. You should be too." As he walked out of the cafe, a strange sense of finality washed over him. He was free. Free of the lies, the manipulation, and the pain. He had done everything he could, and now it was time for him to live the life he deserved. Back at their new home, as he watched Lily finish up her art project, James smiled to himself. His life was still being rebuilt, but the foundation was solid now. They were stronger than ever, and nothing, not even Emily's desperate attempts, would take that away. For the first time in a long while, James allowed himself to dream again. Not of revenge, but of the future, of new possibilities. He had rebuilt what was broken, and now he was free to move forward with his daughter by his side.